Planet 0851, year 2030. I knew it as a backwater planet, the kind of lawless, gritty industrial rock where the lowest of the lowest in the galaxy came to live, hide out, and completely disappear in plain sight. Long story short, decades ago, the alien civilizations reached out to humanity in a final attempt at communication before writing Earth off as a dead planet. Not because our world was physically dying, mind you, but because we were on the fast track to completely destroying ourselves through our own warfare and stubbornness. The Galactic Federation's original conclusion had been simple: let humanity wipe itself out, and whichever interstellar empire wanted the leftover scraps could claim Earth and reshape it however they saw fit. Lo and behold, Earth proved them completely wrong. Humanity actually accepted expansion, proving we deserved a place among the stars. Portals opened up across the sectors, running on a strict monthly system cycle that allowed humans to travel, find off-world work, and build brand new lives throughout the cosmos. Since my background back home was in the medical field, a certified nursing assistant, to be exact, Earth's governing panels thought my skills were valuable enough to pack me off on dangerous, long-term contracts wherever healthcare workers were desperately needed. And let me tell you something, I used to think human patients were difficult and stubborn to deal with. Try taking care of over 100,000 different alien species. The hazard list alone was insane. Some had claws, some carried deadly venom, some communicated only through telepathy, and others operated strictly through touch or scent. If an alien patient decided they didn't like the specific way a human smelled, well, you usually didn't get a second chance to change their mind. Not to mention the most obvious problem. Aliens were structurally so much stronger and faster than humans. Advanced in biological ways, it would take our species millions of years of evolution to reach. Yet, when old age and terminal illness finally caught up to them, even the most formidable warriors couldn't escape the natural, unyielding laws of life and death. No matter how advanced an alien civilization became, Lord Death eventually came knocking for everyone. In a strange way, I became their Valkyrie. Not all of the residents under my watch were fallen soldiers, but many of them were. My job was to stay by their side, rendering compassionate care until the very end. I was one of the lucky ones who was still alive to talk about it. A lot of aides I'd started out with had lost their lives to workplace injuries or unexpected violent outbursts. Others simply said, "Fuck this shit," and quit the contract long ago. The pay was outrageous, but it absolutely had to be, considering there was a high hazard pay chance you weren't coming home at the end of the shift. My greedy side had accepted the contract without a second thought. The nursing facilities on this planet were in desperate, constant need of help and were throwing around large sums of money. Still, the money completely changed my family's life. It helped me support my 2 daughters and my mother back on Earth. I was able to buy them a state-of-the-art new smart home, one that cooked nutritious meals for my girls, assisted my mother whenever her health required it, and ensured they wanted for absolutely nothing while I was light years away. Leaving them behind was the hardest decision I'd ever made. After this specific gig ended, I could finally retire before I turned 37, at least for a good long while. Back on Earth, I probably would have been breaking my back working until I was in my late 60s or even my 70s. Instead, I was setting myself up to travel, not just around Earth, but to famous vacation planets known for their unique delicacies, vibrant cultures, and breathtaking landscapes. And boy, did I need a vacation. My human body had been pushed to its absolute limits, and it was no longer recognizable to me. Years of grueling double shifts, physical injuries, and chronic stress had finally caught up with me. I had deep scratches plugging my skin from head to toe from handling aggressive, frightened alien species. Half of my mouth was literally missing teeth from a bad shift, forcing me to wear a partial. At 35 years old, on my worst days, I felt 80. Mostly, I was highly expressive with my style. I dyed my hair a lot. I'd actually had to cut a lot of it off because certain aggressive residents kept grabbing and pulling it out from the sides, so I now rocked a curly mohawk. I kept it dyed a vibrant purple, my favorite color, while the tips were a striking, icy silver white. I felt like a character at times, the way I wore it, but I permanently kept it like this to match one of my favorite residents. There was a bit of an obsession there, but not in a bad way. Maybe I was delusional at times, but I felt connected to him in ways I did not even understand, like a bond never expected. I'd even noticed that the familiar silver and cool tones of my icy tips had a strange, subconscious way of anchoring him, helping to calm him down whenever the dark memories of his past caught up to him. But as close as I was to retirement, I was dancing on a very dangerous line. I always cared about the people under my watch. That was just part of the job. But I had a strict, ironclad rule to never allow myself to become emotionally attached to a resident. Not until Kadrin, for the first time in my entire career, I had broken my own number one rule. Part 2, he had become the father figure I never had growing up. Unlike most of the elderly dying residents residing in the long-term facility, he was still considered relatively young by the standard lifespan of his elite military species. Aside from losing one of his legs during high-stakes combat, there was very little physically wrong with him. He was incredibly strong, heavily built, and dangerously fast. He also had a legendary habit of absolutely beating the hell out of every male nurse brave enough to challenge his authority or handle him roughly. Needless to say, our unit didn't have many male nurses on shift anymore. Nobody wanted the hazard of that assignment. One evening, he was having a severe, violent PTSD episode, completely lost in his own mind and reliving bloody battles that had ended centuries ago. I'd finally had enough, not of him, but of watching the rest of the facility staff cowered in fear, treating him like a mindless monster. I understood deep trauma more than most people realized. My own personal demons came from a completely different kind of battlefield. Years of relentless emotional abuse had left jagged psychological scars that no medical scanner could ever detect, and those dark memories still crept into my mind when I least expected them. He was unlike any alien species I had ever encountered. His skin was entirely metallic silver, not gray, not pale, but a brilliant, reflective silver armor. Even his tongue matched the striking metallic sheen of his skin. The only feature that wasn't silver was his piercing, crimson-red eyes. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, he was an absolute beast of a soldier. Iggy, one of the younger aides I'd taken under my wing over the last 2 years, usually worked shifts alongside me, and the two of us made a fantastic team. Iggy was an Aurelie, and she was breathtaking in a way no human female could ever hope to imitate. Standing nearly 6.5 feet tall, her slender frame shimmered with living, shifting iridescent chromatophore patterns right beneath her smooth blue-violet skin, looking like moonlight dancing across tropical reefs. Large, luminous eyes watched the world with quiet empathy, while delicate, fin-like ears fanned gracefully from the sides of her head, their translucent membranes catching every shift of light. Long midnight hair flowed down her back with natural streaks of bioluminescent blues and purples, and every single movement she made possessed an effortless, floating elegance that reminded me of an exotic sea creature walking among the stars. Honestly, she looked completely out of place working in a gritty, industrial nursing facility. She should have been modeling on a luxury planet somewhere. One night, after Kadrin suffered another one of his terrifying episodes, Iggy finally sat me down and explained the deep lore of the Nithari to me. Earlier that shift, he had been standing quietly in the facility's artificial rehabilitation garden, staring blankly at the trees. The next second, his mind was somewhere else entirely. His breathing dropped into a harsh rattle, and every muscle in his massive frame tightened so violently I thought they might tear right through his silver skin. His pupils narrowed into sharp predatory slits as he violently swung his arms, searching for invisible enemies that weren't there. Later that evening, Iggy told me it wasn't uncommon for his kind. The Nithari had been forged through centuries of brutal war. They weren't merely frontline soldiers, they were the Galactic Federation's ultimate hidden blade, an elite species entrusted with the dark missions no one else could accomplish or survive. Black operations, high-value extractions, counterterrorism, intelligence gathering, assassinations that officially never existed in the records. Entire star system governments slept peacefully because somewhere in the dark, a Nithari operative had already eliminated a threat before anyone else even knew it existed. They ranked among the Federation's most influential, highly respected civilizations, not because they possessed the largest military force, but because they possessed the lethal precision everyone quietly relied upon and feared. Their advanced technology perfectly reflected that dark purpose. Everything they built was designed for survival, precision, and war. But their greatest weapon was their own biology. Every Nithari carried an instinctive, beast-like predatory form deep within their genetic makeup, a second nature capable of overwhelming strength, blinding speed, and terrifying violence. Most spent decades of intense martial training learning to master it. Those who couldn't often destroyed themselves long before an enemy ever had the chance. People look at them and think they're monsters, Iggy had whispered to me that night. They're not monsters, Vivi. They're survivors. She explained that many returned from campaigns carrying deep psychological wounds no medical scanner could ever detect. Nightmares, hypervigilance, heightened instincts that refused to switch off. Sometimes, even centuries after the actual fighting ended, all it took was the wrong ambient sound, the wrong scent, or a stray memory, and the bloody battlefield came rushing back in an instant. Looking back now, I finally understood why Cadron always apologized so heavily after one of his episodes. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was terrified of losing control and becoming the very thing the galaxy feared most. Part 3. On this particular night, Cadron was having another severe episode. The floor staff had scattered, desperately trying to calm him from a safe distance while he tore through the room. Already thoroughly annoyed with how the midnight shift was going, I shoved my hands into my scrub pockets and walked straight into the room, clicking my tongue, a weird habit I'd picked up over my years in healthcare. Before I could get very far, one of the male aides lunged forward and grabbed my arm in a rough grip. And it wasn't gentle. "Let me go!" I snapped, wrenching my arm free from his hold. "Whatever, bitch," he muttered, backing away toward the doorframe. "Your funeral." As I continued walking deeper into the room, I suddenly had to duck as a heavy metal chair came flying across the space. It missed me completely and slammed directly into the chest of the exact same male aide who had just called me a bitch. I couldn't help the dark chuckle that escaped my throat. Well, looking at the shattered pieces of the chair, I sighed dramatically. Now what am I supposed to sit in? Cadron turned so quickly his prosthetic leg barely kept up with the momentum of his massive upper body. He barreled straight toward me like a freight train. Within seconds, two enormous silver hands wrapped securely around my waist, effortlessly lifting me several feet into the air until we were completely eye level. The entire unit seemed to stop breathing. Staff members scattered in every direction. "I'll call the authorities," someone yelled frantically from the safety of the hallway. I wanted to laugh out loud. What exactly were the backwater authorities going to do? Planet 0851's local security never did anything. Cadron simply held me aloft, breathing heavily as those glowing crimson eyes frantically searched my face for threats. Oddly enough, his breath didn't stink at all. It smelled like absolutely nothing. Of all the logical thoughts my brain could have produced while dangling at the mercy of an 8-foot alien warrior mid-rage, that was somehow the one it landed on. "Your breath stinks," I told him flatly. He stared at me. The shocked look on his silver face was absolutely priceless, like he genuinely couldn't fathom that a tiny human female had just insulted his hygiene mid-flashback. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted Iggy and several other nurses peeking around the hallway corner, both hands covering their mouths in sheer panic. They weren't used to human behavior, especially not mine. Smart mouth, reckless, and operating with zero survival instincts. So, I crossed my arms, casually dangling several feet off the floor. "What now, big guy? You gonna kill me?" His grip tightened slightly, and I dropped the sarcasm, letting my voice soften into a grounded, serious tone. "Just so you know, you'd be taking a mother away from her children. And I know you don't want that." I was strangely used to being manhandled and tossed around at this point in my career. Working in healthcare across hundreds of diverse alien species has a funny way of completely rewriting your definition of personal space. His red eyes remained locked, dead on mine. Then, something shifted deep within him. The blind, predatory rage slowly faded, and recognition replaced it. It was as if he suddenly remembered exactly who I was, his caretaker, his friend. His grip loosened. Slowly, carefully, he lowered me back onto the solid floor. The room remained completely silent. No one moved, no one dared to breathe. Finally, Cadron looked away, his massive shoulders dropping. "I apologize." His voice was rough, heavily strained by whatever ghosts had just dragged him back into the past. I smiled, stepping closer to pat his arm. "It's okay, Pops." For a second, he simply stared down at me. Then, the smallest, rarest hint of a smile crossed his silver face. Ever since that day, he has taught me many things, and I've taught him a few tricks in return. For instance, I introduced him to the wonderful world of human video games. Turns out, A centuries-old alien war veteran is ridiculously naturally good at first-person shooters and fighting games. The very first time he completely destroyed my character on screen, I loudly accused him of cheating, and he laughed so hard he practically shook the room for 5 minutes straight. From then on, we were inseparable. I called him Pops. He called me Nala, which meant daughter in the Netheri language. And over the course of those 2 years, he started teaching me how to fluently speak it. Part 4. 2 years later, my contract was almost over. By August, I would officially be retired at 37 years old. For a human civilian, that was almost unheard of. It was my day off after another grueling midnight shift, and Iggy had spent the entire week relentlessly trying to convince me to go out with her to a high-end club later that night. I was a massive introvert, an old soul who felt completely out of place in loud, crowded establishments like that. But she insisted, pleading that she needed moral support against a group of women her friends were inviting. So, I guess 5'2" me was going to go up against model-esque aliens who stood at 6'2" and higher. Mind you, this particular club had a reputation for hosting the absolute worst of the worst when it came to the galactic underworld. Criminals, mercenaries, pirates, and smugglers gathered in the shadows, people with enough money to buy planetary governments and enough power to make those governments look the other way. But sure, let's go have fun tonight. I put on my most comfortable vintage green V-neck dress. It looked completely out of place at an underworld establishment, but the rich color went beautifully with my warm caramel complexion. When we arrived, Iggy and the other women were absolute visions, young and carefree. Surprisingly, the friends she thought would give her problems turned out to be amazing, and it wasn't long before we got completely enveloped in conversation after conversation. I hadn't realized how much liquor I'd been throwing back, and soon enough, the alcohol hit and I was out on the dance floor right alongside them. Then, the mood completely turned around us. A sudden, heavy sensation swept over the room, making the tiny hairs on my neck and arms stand straight up in primal awareness. Every single survival instinct I possessed screamed the exact same thing. An apex predator has just entered the room. We had just hurried back to our table when a frightened club worker approached us, shaking violently and barely holding it together. The smile vanished from my face as a worried, heavy unease settled deep in my stomach. I looked around and could see the behavior of the patrons shifting in real time. The roughest criminals in the establishment had suddenly gone timid and quiet, as if walking around on their tippy toes, terrified of offending someone. Then, I glanced up toward the VIP balcony. My heart sank straight into my stomach. The figure standing up there had to be at least 8 feet tall. His skin was metallic liquid silver, reflecting the club's dim neon beams until he looked almost unreal. His eyes were a striking, deep crimson red that seemed to glow when the light hit them just right. He was wearing a black tactical shirt, sleeveless, stretched incredibly tight across a powerful, heavily muscled chest. Boy, did he have a nice one, even through my crappy human eyesight. His massive silver arms were crossed over his chest. He possessed a sharp jawline, high cheekbones, and the largest Adam's apple I had ever seen on a male. He didn't appear old, but he wasn't young either. Long, silver-white hair cascaded past his shoulders, contrasting sharply with his dark clothes. Large, pointed ears extended through his hair like elegant blades, flicking and reacting to every ambient sound in the room. And right now, they were angled directly down at our table as he stared intently at me. I immediately started squirming in my chair. Yep, it was time to go. I knew exactly what that predatory race was. He was a Netheri, the exact same species as Kadron, the veteran patient I took care of every single day at the facility. What the absolute fuck were his people doing down here in the lower sectors? I knew firsthand just how terrifyingly strong, lethal, and hyper-disciplined the Netheri were. Seeing him up there, staring a hole straight through me, made me instantly suspicious and incredibly nervous. Everything about his frame looked solid, predatory, and superhumanly fit. I tried pretending like he didn't exist, even though those glowing red eyes were burning a hole straight through me. I knew the drill with powerful elites in these clubs. He would inevitably invite the young, gorgeous girls at our table up to the VIP section. That was my cue to exit. I was hungry, and the liquor was starting to kick in a little too hard. As the women continued speaking with Iggy in a language I didn't understand, I waited for a break so I could tell her I was leaving. Suddenly, Iggy's face shot toward me, every ounce of vibrant color completely drained from her iridescent skin. Oh, I did not like that expression, not one bit. She nodded tightly to the other women, and they immediately took off. A deeply eerie, ominous feeling crawled over my skin. "Well, Iggy, this was fun," I said, pushing my chair back. "But I believe it's time for me to go and call it a night. Thank you for bringing me out and making sure I had an enjoyable time." Before I could even take a step, Iggy lunged forward and grabbed my hand in a tight grip. "Vivi, you cannot go." I stood there, halfway out of my seat, looking at her like she had lost her mind. Why not? Her face turned sickly pale, frustration and panic radiating off her so intensely it started making me nervous. I tried hard not to visibly shake myself. "Iggy, seriously, what is going on?" I glanced back up toward the VIP section, but the large silver male was gone. Thank God. His unblinking stare had been making me incredibly uncomfortable. Iggy looked nervously at the departing girls, then leaned in close to me. "I believe we have been summoned." I blinked at her. "Okay, well, I think you guys have been summoned. I'm going home." "Vivi, these people are dangerous, and they possess privileges that are far beyond our comprehension." Iggy hissed, her grip tightening around my fingers. "That male who was staring at you, Vivi, he is not only someone important, he is part of one of the Royal Galactic families. And his full-time job? He is an elite assassin for the government. Him and his men do the black operations nobody else wants to touch, and they get whatever they want. They want an audience with us, and he specifically asked for you." "For me?" I asked flatly, my brain scrambling. "What does a royal assassin want with a broken-down, torn-up, and battered human?" "I do not know, Vivi," Iggy whispered, her large eyes wide with pure fright. "But if you leave, you will put all of us in danger." Well, shit. Spotting a server hurrying past our table, I reached out and gently caught her arm. She froze instantly, looking terrified. "I'm going to need another round before I go up there," I muttered. The poor woman nodded so fast I thought her neck might snap, rushing off to the bar. I glanced back toward the empty balcony one last time. A minute later, we threw back our shots. The burning liquor did its best to calm the static in my nerves, but mentally, my mind was racing at 100 miles an hour, desperately calculating how the hell I was going to get out of this situation alive.